Mr. Denham.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 2903 as amended.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the exchange of letters between the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and the Committee on Homeland Security be included in the congressional record.
Without objection.
H.R. 2903, the FEMA Reauthorization Act, would reauthorize FEMA and make important reforms that will save money and speed up disaster recovery. It keeps FEMA funding at current levels, it fully complies with the House budget rules, and includes bipartisan provisions passed by the House last Congress. This legislation is the product of key members working together to produce real reforms. First, let me thank Chairman John Mica, Chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, for his strong leadership and work on this legislation. I also want to thank Ranking Member Norton of the subcommittee for her help with drafting legislation that protects our first responders, incorporates real reforms, and strengthens our emergency management capability. The legislation also incorporates a top priority of the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Rahal, which enables Indian tribes to request disaster declarations, provisions I support. I thank you for his work on these important provisions. I also want to thank Chairman King of the Committee on Homeland Security and Bill Arakis of the Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Communications for their leadership and working with us on the integrated public alert and warning system provisions of the bill. I look forward to working with the Committee on Homeland Security on other important issues. Finally, I want to thank the gentlemen from New York and Missouri, Mr. Hanna and Mr. Carnahan, for their work and leadership on reauthorizing the National Dam Safety Program included in this bill. I'm also pleased that this legislation has wide support from key stakeholders representing first responders, state and local officials, tribal communities, and the private sector. We've received letters endorsing provisions in this bill from the National Emergency Management Association, the International Association of Emergency Managers, the National Alliance of State Broadcasters Associations, the National Associations of Broadcasters, and the National Association of Counties, the Association of State Dam Safety Officials, the Disaster Recovery Contractors Association, the National Task Force Representative for the 28 sponsoring agencies of the Urban Search and Rescue Task Forces, and tribal communities around the nation. The Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has a long tradition of approaching FEMA and emergency management issues in a bipartisan manner. Disasters don't follow political boundaries, and ensuring we are prepared is critical to our nation. From major hurricanes to floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, wildfires, nuclear accidents, and terrorist attacks, the costs of disasters can be significant, not just in terms of economic costs, but in the devastation of lives, homes, and communities. A good response to a disaster is critical to saving lives and minimizing damage, but recovering such devastation is the key to rebuilding local economies and helping people put their lives back together. After Hurricane Katrina, Congress authorized FEMA for the first time and fundamentally reformed the nation's disaster response system. Congress rebuilt FEMA and strengthened disaster response capabilities. We created a national preparedness system so that states and the federal government will have the plans and resources in place before disaster strikes. But as the reconstruction from Hurricane Katrina dragged on and on and on, it became apparent Congress needed to streamline the disaster recovery program so that communities can rebuild faster and for less money. The longer it takes to rebuild basic infrastructure after a disaster, the longer it takes for a local economy and tax base to recover, and the more it costs the federal taxpayers. The FEMA Reauthorization Act includes key reforms to save money by cutting through costly bureaucratic red tape and speeding up reconstruction. For example, at one of our subcommittee hearings last year, the Inspector General's office testified that if FEMA just implemented the cost estimating provisions of the Disaster Mitigation Act, recovery could be sped up significantly and costs minimized. H.R. 2903 sets deadlines for FEMA to finally implement these common sense provisions and makes other changes that will save taxpayers money. This bill also would make other important reforms, including setting a clear framework for the development of the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, the IPAWS system, to ensure money's not wasted. At the committee's request, the GAO issued a report in 2009 detailing the key problems with FEMA's development of IPAWS. We also heard from many stakeholders, including people with disabilities, the elderly, and industries like the commercial broadcasters and wireless industry, that FEMA was not giving them a seat at the table as FEMA modernized the system. H.R. 2903 sets a clear framework and deadlines to ensure key stakeholders are part of FEMA's modernization of the system. This will be critical in ensuring there are effective alerts and warnings to the public. In addition to these common sense reforms, this reauthorizes FEMA's overall management budget, the Urban Search and Rescue System, and the Emergency Management Assistance Compact. This legislation will save lives, save money, and help communities devastated by disasters recover and rebuild faster. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2903 as amended, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California.